It's a great pleasure to be here this evening to kick off the second annual Symposium of the Middlebury Center for Social Entrepreneurship. We have much to celebrate this evening. It was just 1 year ago that we gathered in this space to launch the MCSE. Before I say a few words about the importance of the establishment of the center here at Middlebury, I would like to recognize the individuals who have made the center's work possible. We launched the MCSE last year thanks to the generosity of Alan Hassenfeld and the Hassenfeld Family Foundation. Alan is the former CEO at Hasbro, Inc., and has been the leader in corporate philanthropy over the long course of his business career. His enthusiasm and spirit has touched the lives of millions of people and aided communities around the world. We wish Alan could be with us here today, but he is quite literally in the air, returning from a conference in Europe. We thank him for making it possible for us to do this exciting work here at Middlebury. Thank you, Alan. We have with us here tonight, and over the next several days, members of the newly established MCSE Advisory Board. I would like to acknowledge Becky Castle, Hal Colston, Margaret Crotty, Jesse Fink, Charlie McCormick, Garrett Moran, and Ernie Parizeau. Thank you for your guidance and support, all of you. We in higher education are not immune to the challenges brought about as a result of the transformation of societies from the industrial to the information age. Reimagining a liberal arts education to reflect the needs of today means equipping our students, for starters, with what a traditional liberal arts education offers and has offered for a long time. But it includes also, and more than ever, a set of skills to allow our students to engage and address so many challenges new to this century and to this and future generations of students. That is, we need to remain committed to a rigorous and broad curriculum as the foundation of our students' education, yet at the same time offer our students the opportunity to apply what they learn to the world they will enter upon graduation. I'm not suggesting we stray from our core mission, educating students in the liberal arts tradition. However, the external environment in which our students enter upon graduation has changed significantly, even from merely a decade ago. We, as educators, must adapt to those changes in some fundamental ways in order to sustain the quality of the education we offer our students, to retain and recruit an excellent faculty, and to continue to attract a diverse and talented student body. The world has not only changed, but the speed at which it is changing requires us to rethink the meaning of a 4-year liberal arts education. How do we define a liberal arts education for these dynamic times? What should all students learn while at Middlebury to best prepare them for their post-college lives now and into the future, rather than for a world 20 or even just 10 years ago? What kind of hands-on opportunities should we provide for our students, and how should they relate to the traditional classroom learning experience? And how can students take advantage more easily and freely of the college's educational resources now scattered in more than 35 sites and among 35 partner universities around the world? We are learning quickly, and in many cases, our students are teaching us. Our young people are demanding opportunities to tackle social problems, to try their hand at new idea formation, and to learn how to become effective social entrepreneurs. At Middlebury, the Middlebury Center for Social Entrepreneurship is one way in which we are supporting our undergraduates to prepare for and engage our increasingly complex world. This evening, we are celebrating not only the kickoff of the second annual MCSE Symposium, but also the end of MCSE's first successful year. The MCSE has provided a rich program of summer grants and fellowships, a weekly social entrepreneurship lecture series, and training workshops and forums for students, faculty, and staff. The annual symposium brought Bill Drayton, Jacqueline Novogratz, and now Billy Parish and Majora Carter to our campus, true exemplars in the field of social entrepreneurship. The MCSE has created programs to encourage high school students to learn about social enterprise, and they are conducting research to analyze the outcomes of student design projects. Finally, Middlebury, in its role as an Ashoka U Changemaker campus, is creating a program to foster a long-term relationship between the MCSE and Middlebury schools abroad by establishing social entrepreneurship opportunities for students while they study abroad. It'll be exciting to see what the center hopes to achieve in this coming year, and I'm very grateful to those who will make this happen. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Bronwyn Oatley, class of 13, who will introduce our keynote speaker this evening. Bronwyn?
Thanks, Ron, and good evening, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here and feel so honored to have been asked to introduce Billy tonight. I know you're all likely as excited as I am to hear him speak, so I won't take up too much time, but I want to take a moment and outline my own connection to Billy's most recent book. It's called Making Good: Finding Meaning, Money, and Community in a Changing World, providing an introduction which I hope will give you a sense of the profound impact that Billy is having on the lives of individuals around the world. This Christmas, becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the idea of giving my mother yet another kitchen implement or my dad yet another Christmas sweater, I opted instead to buy each of my family members copies of Making Good, a book that I had recently read. Now, I have 4 sisters and 2 parents. It was a lot of books. As an aside, Billy has asked that I recommend this as a gift-giving strategy for everyone in attendance next holiday season. In all seriousness, though, I gave this gift drawing on one of the principles I pulled from Making Good, the author's idea about the importance of following through, of passing on an idea, concept, or book that has spoken to you, hoping that it will speak to others as well. Being the nerd that I am, I also went through each one of the books and starred and underlined things that I thought would be particularly important for the people who are receiving them. My mom is also big on inscriptions, so at the front of each of the books I included an introduction, a document that I later sent to Professor John Isham a few days before J-term started, begging him to let me into his social entrepreneurship class. My family liked the introduction, and I think John did too. He let me into the class and asked that I read a few lines from this letter. This one was to my dad, whose name is Roger. Raj, I first came across this book last spring when I was down at Middlebury Center for Social Entrepreneurship. As I was leaving the center, Liz Robinson, the director for the Project on Creativity and Innovation, who is totally rad, by the way, offered me this book. You just have to read it, she said. Billy and Dev are amazing. Being the typical college student that I am, I shelved the book until I had more time for pleasure reading. Unsurprisingly, that time came later this fall when facing exams and final projects and feeling increasingly stressed about the job search, pleasure reading was the thing that seemed most appropriate. That first night, I read the first quarter of the book, flicking off the light and writing in my journal in the next morning, damn, yo, this book is speaking to me. Dad, by passing this gift along to you, my hope is that it will speak to you as well. In many ways, the text is perfect for me at this time in my life, when I'm thinking about the transition from college to the working world. I also believe, however, that it has universal value, as it provides advice and examples of the little ways in which we can all benefit through and make positive change by our interactions and contributions to our own communities. There were also sections of this book that made me stop, pause, and think of you. With this in mind, I've done the unthinkable. I've graffitied your book even before you've had a chance to crack the spine, noting those passages that stuck out for me as definite dad sections. I did this hoping that you would feel my presence and would hear me shouting at you to pay attention when you came across the sections that made me think of you, and only you, when I read this book for the first time. Now fast forward, it's a few weeks after Christmas, and keep in mind that my dad is a fairly conservative guy. I'm sitting in the living room and I get a text message from him saying, Bron, I think my spirit animal is a salmon. Now, I'm not entirely sure what this means, but I'd like to thank Billy for bringing out this inner fish in my father. Having recounted that, I'd like to introduce you to the man who has brought out such reflection. Billy Parish grew up in New York City and attended an all-boys high school before spending a semester at the Mountain School in Vermont, further developing a strong social conscience, which it seems has been there from the start. Billy attended Yale University for 2 years, but left, desiring to make change faster than he could as a full-time student. Following his time at Yale, Billy co-founded the Energy Action Coalition, which subsequently grew into the world's largest youth climate organization. An amazing accomplishment for such a young guy. He has been honored as one of Rolling Stone magazine's climate heroes, and in 2007 he was elected as a fellow by Ashoka, a global association of the world's leading social entrepreneurs. More recently, Billy has co-founded Mosaic, an amazing company that helps to connect people with solar projects they can invest in. It's democratizing solar investment and making clean energy more affordable for all Americans. Forbes has recently called Mosaic the Kickstarter for green energy. Billy is married and has 2 children. He's a thinker, he's a doer, he's a visionary, and I'm very honored to present tonight's speaker, Billy Parish.
Hello. Thank you. I think that was my favorite introduction I've ever gotten. So I have a habit, maybe like some of you, of giving my favorite books away. So when I last night realized I wanted to read a passage from a book in my talk today, it wasn't on my shelf. And so when I got into Middlebury, I called the Vermont bookstore, see if they had it, and a very cheerful woman picked up the phone and said, "Oh, let me check." And then she said, "Oh, it looks like we don't have it, but I know where I can get it." And she said, "They teach it at the high school. I'll make a couple calls." I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "Are you Billy Parish?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I'm going to be at the event tonight, and I'm selling your book. So would it be useful if I dropped it at the Swift Inn?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be amazing." You know who doesn't have service like that? Amazon. So big up to Becky and the Vermont bookstore. It means a lot for me to be here. Middlebury is a very special place to me, not only because of the people who I love who live here, but also the experiences I've had here, and significantly because Middlebury, more than maybe any other college or university I have worked with, and I've worked with many, seems to have made itself into a living laboratory for solving some of the biggest challenges in the world, including climate change. And I might not have dropped out of Yale or college if I had gone here. And I have a J-term student working at my company this month, and he had on the divestment panel of the other night, so I got to catch a little bit of it, and want to cheer on the folks who are pushing on that campaign, and I'm confident that Middlebury will continue to be a leader in this next wave of campus sustainability, which kind of was born here too. So I want to cheer everyone on, and we have maybe 75 minutes together, and here's how I want to spend it. I want to share the 3 biggest lessons I've learned in my life and career. I came a long way, so I want to share something. But this hour isn't about me. It's about all of you. It's about all of us. So I'm actually going to invite you all to ask yourselves some hard questions, to do some exercises. Hopefully everybody has an index card and something to write with. You're going to need it. If you don't, look around, get one. I want you to be prepared to shout. I'm going to actually ask you to shout. I'm going to ask you to talk to people, to engage in this conversation. And then we'll close with some time for open discussion. How's that sound? Good? All right. So I want to read a short passage from this book, Ishmael, because it contains a metaphor that changed my life. And the story is very bizarrely parallel to Bronwyn's, as I told her. So, page 107. 10,000 years ago, the people of your culture embarked on a civilizational flight. Their craft wasn't designed according to any theory at all. They were totally unaware that there is a law that must be complied with in order to achieve civilizational flight. They didn't even wonder about it. They wanted the freedom of the air, and so they pushed off in the first contraption that came to hand, the Taker Thunderbolt. At first, all was well. In fact, all was terrific. The Takers were pedaling away, and the wings of their craft were flapping beautifully. They felt wonderful, exhilarated. They were experiencing the freedom of the air, freedom from restraints that bind and limit the rest of the biological community. And with that freedom came marvels: urbanization, technology, literacy, mathematics, science. Their flight could never end. It could only go on, becoming more and more exciting. They couldn't know, couldn't even have guessed that they were in the air, but not in flight. They were in free fall, because their craft was simply not in compliance with the law that makes flight possible. And I remember reading those words at the tender age of 17 in Vermont at the mountain school, and sitting upright in my bed, and realizing really for the first time where we are as a species, as a civilizational project. And that was the beginning of this path that I've been taking for the last 15 years. I was, up until that point, I was on the tracks. I went to the all-boys prep school in New York City. Both my parents were lawyers. I thought I might be a doctor or a journalist, maybe a lawyer. And this book, that experience at the mountain school, really transformed me, and I became a vegetarian. I gave copies of Ishmael to everyone I knew. For periods of time, I stopped washing my hair or using deodorant. Not totally clear what the impact of that was, but I was confident that there would be some. And it all kind of came into focus a couple years after that. Summer after my sophomore year of college, I had a chance to go to India. And on one trip, I went to this place, which right here is called the Gomu. And it's that means the cow's mouth. It's one of the most sacred places in India. It's the glacier that feeds the Ganges River. And I had an opportunity to hike from the base camp all the way up to the glacier, walking along the river as it became smaller and smaller, up to the source. And then I actually had a chance to walk up on it, and there were scientists studying the glacier, and they told me where it had been the year before and where it had been the year before that. And I realized that what we were doing in the US, what we were doing as a species, was threatening the source of drinking water for 400 million people. And if Ishmael was my kind of the eye-opening, this was the moment of no turning back. This was the moment of, this is my life's work. I realized not long after that this pattern was happening all across the Tibetan plateau and threatening the source of water for many, many more people than that. So I decided to do something. I said, I'm going to organize a regional student climate conference at Yale. I'm going to bring together a bunch of students and figure out, what are we going to do about this? There was just a little bit of student activism going on. There was kind of the beginning of an awareness and awakening going on amongst young people across the U.S. And we brought together, 70 folks to Yale and created a regional student global warming coalition, which grew from there. This is what it looked like at the beginning. We had no money, we had no plan, we didn't really know what we were doing. We duct taped signs, poorly stenciled T-shirts. I took a semester off from college at this time and was sneaking into dining halls and didn't have the access card to get into the dorms. So I had a double with one of my best friends and would often climb in through the windows or have to get let in during the time. So truly bootstrapping this idea, but it turned out that there were other people like me, and there were other people thinking about this, and this kind of tiny group a couple of years later was in Vanity Fair, and all of these people were full-time organizers working with young people all across the US and Canada. We had unified over 60 youth organizations into a kind of meta coalition to represent our generation on this defining challenge of our time. And not long after that, we brought 7,000 young people to Washington, D.C. for the first ever PowerShift conference, and really started building a movement around this issue. So while I had no plan at the beginning and really didn't know what I was going to do with all of this, what I did have was purpose. I had a very clear, burning conviction about what needed to be done. So that is the first lesson I want to share with you all. To follow your purpose, always, always. Purpose is a challenging thing. It's a sometimes changing thing. I've thought about it differently. It's evolved over time, but it has always been the thread. It has been the compass, the guide for me. And not everyone has a moment on the mountain like that, but all of us feel passionately about something. All of us have instincts about what change we want to make in the world, what good we want to do. And strangely, we almost never talk about it. There may be no more important question than, what am I here for? But I've only been asked that question a couple times in my life. So the first thing I'm going to invite you all to do with me is to take a minute or two and to try to write out as concisely as possible your purpose. Raise your hand if you need another 30 seconds. All right. This can evolve over time, but I actually want everyone to stand up. And as powerful as it is to write it out, you know what's more powerful? To say it out loud. So I want everyone to point in this direction. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and we're all going to say it out loud. 1, 2, 3. Abundant, clean energy for and by the people. How'd that feel? Do you know what's more powerful than just saying it out loud? With gusto. 1, 2, 3. Abundant clean energy for and by the people. Woo! Thanks. So, lesson 2, build with the best. By the beginning of 2007, I was seeing the first classes of the student groups that I'd been working with graduate, and they were graduating off a cliff. They wanted to spend the rest of their lives working on these issues and didn't know how to find a job doing it. So many of them came to me, and I was getting calls or emails every day from all of these young people. And I didn't have good answers for them. It was around this time that rumors of a Barack Obama presidency candidacy began to fly. And I remember one night I was taking a bath, and this idea struck me of I had a vision of Barack Obama in New Orleans. This was after Hurricane Katrina, announcing the creation of a clean energy corps, similar to the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Great Depression, a big public mobilization to create green jobs and to solve the climate crisis, to rebuild America's infrastructure through energy efficiency, solar, rebuilding mass transit. And this was a big idea, right? I'm a college dropout. I don't know hardly anything about federal legislation. I don't know anything about workforce development. I don't really know about job creation. But I did know people who did. So I called the 2 people who I thought could help the most with this idea. At least one of them is probably familiar to many of you. Van Jones was at that time running the Ella Baker Center for Human Rights in Oakland, was running a green collar jobs campaign to try to get people hope and opportunity and prevent young people from going to jail, and was becoming one of the leading spokespeople in our entire movement on the green economy. And Joel Rogers, who's a political science professor at UW-Madison, who was the smartest person I'd ever met on workforce development in the green economy. And so the 3 of us started having these conversations we brought in Bracken Hendricks from the Center for American Progress and brought in Lisbeth Shepard, who had created a kind of AmeriCorps type program in France. And this kind of thought and work group started to assemble. We put together a campaign. Van created Green for All, which to take the ideas that he was building on with the green economy nationally, made this idea of the Clean Energy Corps the principal policy idea of the organization to push on a federal level. So we had some real resources around it. We started recruiting national organizations to endorse it. We got 100 major national organizations to endorse it. We got John Edwards' presidential campaign to endorse it, Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign to endorse the policy idea in full. And Barack Obama took the goal, 5 million green jobs, and made it a big part of his presidential campaign. It was a pillar of his campaign. He did not endorse the full program, but many of the ideas found their way into the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the Stimulus Act, and part of the idea became law with the Serve America Act, which expanded AmeriCorps to create a clean energy service corps so young people could have stipended green job training opportunities to grow their skills and have a transition from school or high school or dropping out into the green economy, a pathway out of poverty. So we never do anything by ourselves, and we particularly never do anything world-changing by ourselves. So the second exercise I want to invite you all to do is to make a list of 3 to 5 key people to focus on building relationships with. These are to accomplish that purpose that you already wrote down on your index card. I want you to look at that purpose and then sit quietly and think, who are 3 to 5 people that I need to be working with to achieve that? And I want you to think big. I want you to push it. These are your future co-founders, employees, funders, investors, partners. So again, I'm going to give you a couple minutes. I want you to build a list, 3 to 5 key people for you to build with. All right. So too often, I think, because in my experience, out of fears of rejection or social anxiety, more than anything, we never end up reaching out to those people. And so the next thing I want you to think about is a concrete action that you can take to deepen your relationship with those people. You know, if you have a mission and there are key people that you need to be working with to help achieve that mission, how do you deepen your relationship with them? How do you begin to build a partnership with them? So that action can be, I'm going to write them a letter. I'm going to go on a 7-day backpacking trip with them. I'm going to invite them over for a grilled cheese, whatever it is. I want you to think about and just make a brief note of some action step you could take to deepen your relationship with at least a couple of those people. So this is a good thing to do periodically. I'll pause it now, but I want you to raise your hand if you can commit here today to taking 2 of those actions, to reaching out to people. All right, I want high fives now. That's the commitment, high fives. That is you making that commitment. That's a real hard commitment. Excellent. It's really important. Lesson 3, go to the root. So I will never forget PowerShift 2009. We had 13,000 young people in Washington, D.C. We had just passed the biggest green investment in American history. And I stood on a stage in a giant warehouse full of raging climate activists and said, we have 2 big opportunities this year. We are going to pass federal climate legislation, and we are going to get an international deal in Copenhagen. And all of you know that neither of those things came to pass. And, you know, like many other people who had dedicated their life to solving the climate crisis, I was heartbroken. I had my first daughter by that point, so all of this had a new perspective for me. And I'd gotten the Ashoka Fellowship at that point. I had transitioned leadership to other people. I had moved down to the Southwest and started a family with an amazing woman, and actually had a little time and space to think, and spent a long time thinking about why we had lost and what we could do to win moving forward. And it was around that time that I saw a TED Talk by Bill Gates on energy issues. Has anybody else seen Bill Gates' TED Talk? I commend it to everyone. But this was the piece that really stuck out at me. a very simple equation. I know you all like climate math here. Carbon equals global population times essentially the quality of life, the services that people use. That's if they have a car or a refrigerator, times how much energy those services use, times how much carbon the energy that powers those services that those people use creates. Very simple but powerful equation. People is going up, right? 6 to, who knows? But that's going up. We want services per person to go up, right? There are a lot of people around the world who want to and should improve their access to modern amenities. We can make some progress on energy per service. That's just energy efficiency. We can make some real progress there, but even the best assessments have it. Maybe we make 80% there, and that would be amazing. The only way we get CO2 to zero is by getting C to zero, by getting carbon out of our energy mix. And so, Gates kind of concludes with this innovating to zero, and he talks about all these zero carbon energy technologies that are on the horizon. Now, again, I am a college dropout. I am not going to develop this next technology. That's not my strength. But I took a look at what are the constraints to growing and rapidly deploying as fast as possible those technologies, because I came to see that as the path to solving the climate crisis. And I saw 2 big barriers or constraints. The first was financing. Every single clean energy developer, just about, will tell you that the cost of their capital is too high, and there's not enough of it. And there are only a handful of sources of capital, mainly a couple big banks, that are financing the transition to a clean energy future. So even though the cost of solar panels has declined 80% in the last 5 years, to the point that it's cheaper to produce solar electricity than fossil fuel electricity in 20 states, the financing just isn't there. The banks are well suited to financing a $500 million coal plant or natural gas plant. They are not well suited to financing a $100,000 rooftop solar project. The transaction costs of doing that deal for them are just too high. There are not enough of them that have the specialization and the expertise to do that. So there's a real capital constraint. We're going to need enormous amounts of money, and there's just not enough flexible enough, low-cost enough capital to do that. The second thing that I saw was that the industry lacks a stable policy environment. I now have many friends in the solar industry who have coined this term and use this term, the solar coaster, right? We have incentives, and then we don't. And then we might lose them, then we lose them, then we have them again. And this is happening at the federal level, the utility level, state level, and it kills financing. It's hard to bank projects when you don't know if the revenue sources for those projects are going to be there. And this ultimately comes down to power. The fossil fuel industry is much more powerful than the clean energy industry. And so, they like that solar coaster for the alternatives. And clean energy is still alternative energy for many people. The support for it is a mile wide. Solar is the most popular energy source by far, and an inch deep. And this is part of the reason why. There are about 300,000 solar-powered people in the country, people who get their electricity at their homes from solar. Can everybody find that person? We are at 0.1% market penetration. We do not have a critical mass. These technologies, as amazing as they are, most of those people now are saving money on their utility bills. We have not deployed it fast enough. We don't have yet enough people involved in it. And so, you look at a country like Germany, which has roughly the same solar resource as we have here in Vermont, but over the past summer was getting half of its power from solar for periods of time. And the reason they were able to do that is they had a feed-in tariff program, which is actually a policy idea that they took from a U.S. policy support for the nuclear industry to give long-term price consistency so that you could finance those big nuclear plants. They applied that to clean energy, and it exploded their market. And part of the reason there was public support for it, and that public support, continues in spite of how much, the program has costed in this kind of budget crunch environment that we're in globally, because half of the renewable energy in Germany is owned by people through farmers groups and cooperatives. There's a tradition of cooperative ownership. So people are stakeholders in it. They're owners in it. So, I began to kind of come up with a new theory of change. And in those two constraints, the constraints around the lack of financing and sort of the lack of depth of commitment and interest in clean energy, I saw an opportunity. I believe the transition to clean energy is inevitable, and I believe it is one of the biggest wealth creation opportunities of our time. And so I partnered with some of the best entrepreneurs and software engineers I knew to create a company called Mosaic to accelerate the transition to clean energy by allowing more people to participate in that transition and to benefit from it. So, we started out with a simple online platform where people can invest $25 at a time and earn between 4.5% and 6.5% returns on those investments. We get Kickstarter for green energy a lot. It's a sort of idea people get. And through this platform, people can get access to the same types of investments that these banks have been making for years. That Warren Buffett just put $2 billion into solar projects in California. We're now making it possible for individuals to do the same thing. And because we're a nimble online marketplace and have a specialization in lending into clean energy, we're able to, and we're working on driving down the transaction costs of doing those smaller deals. So we can look at a $100,000 rooftop solar project and make the economics pencil out for us to do the due diligence on it, post it on our platform, and allow people to invest in it. So on January 7th, we launched our first ever publicly available solar project investments. And in 24 hours, they were all sold out. It was over $315,000 worth of solar investments were taken up by almost 450 people. So we went into that day, and there were a handful of lenders, financiers in the clean energy space, and we now have 1,000 clean energy investors on our platform, lending into these projects. So we are working to solve these two constraints: creating a new, more flexible, lower-cost source of capital, and building the political constituency for clean energy policy and climate solutions. So, when I say go to the root, for me, whatever problem you're interested in solving, whatever your purpose is, take the time to study and to think about and figure out where the real barriers are, what the real root causes of those problems are. We all have different analyses of what they are, but take the time up front, if you can, to do that work and to focus your energies. And it's often hard to know how to do that, where the root is, and there are a lot of different ways to build up your skill set and learn around that. In my book, Making Good, we look at 4 different ways people can build the skills and really explore and set themselves up to be real contributors on solving these problems. As you maybe can tell, I follow the on-the-job training approach to learning. School is an obvious one. This is one of the better ones out there, so take advantage of it, as you all are. Apprenticeship, I think, is something of a lost art. Finding the masters in your field and pairing up with them, helping them, learning from them. Or kind of do-it-yourself online learning. There are amazing new platforms that have emerged for you to learn in your own time, in your own way, online. But to really become a master at something, you need to put in serious time. How many folks have read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell or heard about the book? So he kind of popularized the idea that there's this magic number of 10,000 hours you need to commit to becoming a master at something. So, I want you to think about, as you're figuring out how to go to the root, as you're figuring out how to develop a skill set to really tackle, your purpose, what are some of the skills you could imagine spending 10,000 hours on? This is 6 hours a day, 6 days a week for 6 years. It's not a small amount of time to commit to doing something. So again, I want you to think for a minute, and then I actually want you to talk to people next to you. But first, think for a minute, is there one skill maybe that you want to lean into learning over the next period of time? And if so, what is that skill? And which of those approaches, on-the-job training, school, do-it-yourself, apprenticeship, feels right for you to really learn that skill? That's the third and final exercise. So just take a minute. You've got your index card, a skill that you want to lean into learning, and then which of those paths feel right for you to pursue it? Yeah, and go ahead. Start talking to people next to you.
Not particularly. He likes eating a lot of steak. I think that's your
All right. These are hard conversations to interrupt, but I trust, as needed, you all will continue them after this. I want to just close with one final thought, and then eager for tough questions. I've spent a fair amount of time studying social movements of the past. Many debates with Bill McKibben and John Isham and many other colleagues in this work about what we can learn from the civil rights movement, from the Indian independence movement, from other movements, and I think there is a lot there, and I think we, as a climate movement, have learned a lot and can still learn more. But our task is fundamentally different. We need to radically upgrade or replace virtually all of the energy infrastructure in our society in our lifetimes. And so as you think about that civilizational craft that we're on, the Taker Thunderbolt, as they called it in Ishmael, you think about everyone paddling away when we're actually still in free fall. Think about where you go on that craft. Where do you go to rebuild that thing before we hit? Thank you.
So, Billy, you said that you love people here. We love you. Thank you so much for being here. So the great news is that actually Billy tomorrow at 9 will really just be continuing this conversation. A lot of surprises in store, but very much building on the exercise we've just seen. So in some ways, this is very much a two-part exercise. That also means, particularly if you can be here tomorrow morning, that you don't need to feel right now the burden of getting that question out if you don't get to it. Timing-wise, we're going to probably do Q&A, 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll finish up. Does that make sense, Heather? Yeah. All right, so fire away. You asked for tough questions. Keep the questions as short as you can, so we'll get as many in as we can.
Hello. I'm wondering, thank you for your comments. It's been very interesting. I'm wondering, in that TED Talk that you referenced, where Bill Gates gave that equation of what was necessary, and he felt that the CO2 per unit of energy was the critical factor, and you seem to agree with that. What about population? That may not be your gig, I mean, in terms of how you're going to go about this, but it seems to me that, and not just to me, but for a lot of people, that everything is made easier if there aren't as many people drawing from our, that's one of the limits that we have to have, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, we should do everything we can to support women to not have kids that they don't want to have. That's a clear climate solution. It is not my gig. It is an important part of the solution that many great people are working on. I don't see that. I see that as an important piece of it, but as I look to getting us to zero, I don't see how that gets us close to zero. And there are some obvious perils in the work of population management that are a topic for a whole other conversation. So it's a really tough issue. It's part of the solution. There are many important things we can do to help. And that's what I'll say.
I'm Mary Claire. I'm a student at Haverford College who's come up for the conference. And I have a question also that sprung out of your comments about Bill Gates, but relates to the role of sort of the business world and how that relates to social entrepreneurship. And I'm thinking, like when I think of Microsoft, I think of part of the problem. And it's hard for me to parse how we could be thinking solely in terms of innovation towards getting to zero without also thinking about production and industry and how that contributes constantly. And I realize we have to kind of work in that complicated space to look for solutions. But I'm curious what you think about the interaction between those two and kind of, kind of avoiding trying to look too purely at, I don't know. And also I was going to ask if you could comment maybe a little bit on the way like privilege works into organizing and this kind of work as well.
Mm-hmm. Those are both good questions. Climate is, to me, kind of the leading edge of a whole range of problems we're faced with, from resource scarcity to toxins to nature deficit disorder to there's a whole host of issues. I have chosen to focus on clean energy because I see abundant clean energy for and by the people. That's how I think about my purpose now, to help support creating abundant clean energy for and by the people. Because I see if we get that can help with so many other things. That can help resolve, many of the water conflicts and problems. It can, significantly improve public health. It can help us to recycle and manufacture things more efficiently. It solves many other problems. But look, as Bill has said, we need silver buckshot. There's no silver bullet. But I think, the focus on getting to 100% clean energy as fast as we can, to the extent that there is a big bullet in that, sorry to use that metaphor, is one of the biggest solutions out there. As to privilege, it's, I think, racism and sexism and homophobia are some of the biggest challenges facing the planet and facing our movement to heal it. In starting Energy Action Coalition, we were really the first multiracial, multi-class coalition working on climate, and I had to deal with all kinds of baggage from groups that hadn't worked together for a long time, and we were less powerful because of that. So we incorporated into our structure anti-oppression trainings, that anti-oppression staff in the coalition, and it made a real difference in our ability to build a movement together, to understand the different perspectives we were all coming from. And it's very, very hard work, and I appreciate you raising it, because we all need more awareness around it, because we're much weaker to the extent that we're not working together.
Hi, I come from Greece, and as everybody knows, we're in a bit of a pickle economically, but there's so much potential for things like solar energy, and every time I open my mouth at home, even to peers, and I say, this is our future, this is how we can get our country out, everyone laughs at me and says, you're insane. And I was wondering what advice you have to framing the issue and trying to get people to understand how solar energy and just green energy is the future and a way to come out of the economic crisis that we're facing.
you know, it's been really interesting for me to, with Mosaic, we actually started by creating a platform to allow people to make zero interest investments in clean energy projects. They get paid back their principal. They put in $100, they get that back over time, but without interest because of the Securities and Exchange Commission and those regulations. And so we had messaging that was very focused on the philanthropic kind of component of it. And as we've been able to now offer returns to people, we've had to kind of shift our messaging and have studied a lot of the messaging and that, you know, the most effective clean energy marketers have used. And, you know, not surprisingly, it basically comes down to the monetary value proposition for people. In many states now, people can go solar for no money down and save money, you know, 5 to 15% on their utility bills every month. And that's based on this idea of somebody else paying for the solar installation up front, and then you just make monthly payments for it. And so that's how we're doing it too. Instead of a bank financing it up front, we've got lots of people financing it up front, and people's monthly payments go towards paying them back. But, you know, I don't know if there are how solar leasing in Greece works, but that value proposition of no money down, save money on your utility bills is a pretty powerful one.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, the question was, as you think about the future and growing the business, are there things that you can think of that would be breakout or tipping point type points of inflection, and what can you do to sort of get there faster? I mean, right now you're at a period where it seems like you're going to be you're proving the model and you're collecting a lot of data about how this would work. It's all really important and you need to do to get it to scale. But for it to really have the intended impact, it's got to get much, much, much bigger. And usually there's some event, there's some breakout that causes it to become really popular. Do you have a crystal ball on that?
So let me answer that question in two ways. One, I talk with a lot of the kind of leading online organizers in the country. And I went on a hike with Joan Blades, who's one of the MoveOn founders, and she talked about how MoveOn's growth was incredibly spiky. They basically had almost 90% of their growth during 3 spurts, one with the Clinton impeachment, one with the Iraq War, one with the Obama campaign in 2008, and they just rode those moments. They were there at the right time. They created the right petitions and tools for people to organize around. So, you know, part of the answer to that is we see, you know, there will be other crises, you know, crashes in the financial systems that, you know, like what happened in 2008 that shook a lot of investor confidence, had a lot of people looking at different options. So we are looking for those and waiting and trying to be ready when they come. Another piece of it is what we can proactively do. And, you know, our investments right now are long-term. They make monthly payments, but the term of the notes is typically 8 to 10 years, which is a long-term investment for a lot of people to be locked up in that way. So 2 of the things we're doing are we're working to create a secondary market so people can trade their notes. They can sell them and get it in and out. And we're creating IRA and 401k products. Because if you think about, you know, analysts say we need $1.5 trillion to transition to clean energy. There's $17 trillion in 401k and IRA accounts. That's long-term money. That's people looking for these types of products, like fixed income type products. So that's one that we're aggressively working on and think we'll crack pretty soon.
We're going to finish with two quick questions, and I'm going to ask Zach and Jeannie to give them consecutively, just in the interest of time. So we're going to conduct a little experiment to see how these questions overlap. And then if you could answer them, and then after that, we're going to have one last event.
Okay, thanks. I guess this works. So nationally, it seems like wind power has done better in terms of getting federal incentives for manufacturing, tax credits, whatever. And because of that, wind power's, sort of eclipsed solar in the last few years, I feel like. Does solar need similar incentives to catch up, or do you think it'll get there on its own?
So I was actually first obsessed with wind and moved to North Dakota for 6 months. I remember reading The Comforting Whirlwind, one of Bill's beautiful books, in, throw water up in the air, this kind of freeze in the air type winter in North Dakota, because that's the #1 ranked wind state in the country. And there was very little happening there. So I go to the front edges of where I think things need to happen. And at that point, that was the renewable energy technology that most of the smart kind of clean energy people I talked to thought was the most promising one. Almost everyone I talk to now thinks solar is the right one. I'd love to hear Jesse Fink's perspective on this. He probably knows more than, I would guess, anyone in the room on this subject. Jesse, do you have a take on which renewable energy technology is going to win? Solar. And the incentives are a cluster thing. The wind incentive just got renewed, which is great. The solar incentive looks sort of safe for the time being, but they're all vulnerable, and the policies are really the solar incentive is particularly dumb because it's an investment tax credit, and you need passive income to monetize that tax credit. And guess who has passive income? Mostly none of us. It's mainly big banks and insurance companies that have it. So it distorts the market, and so big banks monetize those tax credits. You need them to do these deals, and so they capture most of the economics because there are so few of them that have that money. So one of the policy ideas we are working on is changing the law to make it so that you don't require passive income to monetize the tax credits, that anyone with taxable income could monetize those tax credits, so we could all be equity investors in renewable energy, and that would allow us to offer higher rates of return on our platform. So that's something we're also working on.
Billy, a plug for Zach, who just asked the question. He's a junior here, and he's actually writing a book on this topic. So
wow.
Hope you guys get together tomorrow.
Cool.
Jeannie, can we get a quick final question from you, please?
Yeah, thanks. Right here. Thanks so much for coming. It's been really inspiring to listen to you and to read your book and everything. I guess the question I have is, are there ways that you can envision combining such broad-scale innovative impact as what you're having with Solar Mosaic, for instance, or writing your book, with also having more personal impact? Because for me, I find what feels most safe is to just say, all right, I'm going to go hermit on a farm and not have any carbon impact and grow my own food. But I know that impact is going to be limited to my own lifestyle. So, yeah, are there ways that you can see combining both the personal lifestyle changes with the broader impact that you've managed to successfully create?
Yeah, that is a beautiful question. As much as possible, this is a cliche, I'm also trying to be the change that I want to see in the world, and that's hard. And I think there are so many barriers to us living in a more sustainable way individually. But I mainly bike to work every day, which I love. That's an amazing thing. My wife and I are building a home up on Black Mesa on the Navajo Reservation, where that's going to be kind of our retreat, where we can go for long stretches and just live off the land, because that's important to me too. So I think we all need to find that balance in our own way. I know a lot of people for whom meditation or yoga is a really important part of that. A lot of people I know need to get their hands in the soil. For me, it is all personal. A big part of the reason I am doing this work is because I love the people that I do it with. So, we are building this online platform that's, the virtual, stuff, but it's mainly, sitting around tables with people I respect a lot and love. So, makes it work for me.
So before I reintroduce Ron and one of our MCSE fellows, let me personally again, Billy, thank you. And